It's a privilege to have two very distinguished academicians, Professor Michael Franklin and Professor Carolina Franklin of Swansea University, United Kingdom. They are here in connection with the British Council program. They are Commonwealth Fellows. They are exploring the various vistas relating to the field of poetry and the field of literature. On behalf of the Department of Mass Communication, on behalf of all the faculty and the students, I would like to welcome you, sir and madam. With this brief introduction, now I request our student Zahra and Augustine to proceed with their explorations.
Hello, ma'am. Hello, sir. Welcome to the Department of Mass Communication. How are you feeling coming to India? This is your second time, right?
That's right. Yes. Well, India is an amazing confusion in the streets,
Okay.
but we love the countryside and we love the birds and we love the people. It's just that sometimes the roads there are too many of India's people on it.
All right.
And our driver always seems to be aiming for them to reduce the population, so to speak.
Right.
Madam, same question to you.
Well, it's a cliche, I suppose, to people from Europe that India is overwhelming experience, really. And we found that to be true. But very exciting for us, I think, and exciting to meet new friends and colleagues and
Right.
new students. And also we are both very interested in exploring cultural heritage and sites and old sites connected with history, and it's
Okay.
all around us here, so it's been absolutely fascinating. So our minds are blown.
What are the places you've been to?
Well, this particular visit, we came to Delhi first of all,
Right.
and we did some lectures there,
Okay.
and then we looked at some places around that area.
Yes, we looked at Humayun's tomb, and I was
Okay.
particularly interested to go there because I'm very keen on Prince Darashikhu.
Oh, all right.
I wish that he'd won and not Aurangzeb. I think things might have proved a little different.
He was
in
more of a
India.
literary person.
More of a literary person and more of a pluralist. And
That's right.
what I like about India is to see a mingling of Hindu and
Obviously.
Muslim
Communities.
culture.
The culture that we have.
Yes,
Right.
yes, exactly. And
we
I
were
think
fascinated also with Humayun's tomb to see the mausoleum and the tradition of the gardens,
Okay.
the formal gardens round it,
That's the Mughal
Uh,
style.
the style of it, because we were hoping that we would see the Taj Mahal. So we'd seen an earlier prototype of that with Humayun's tomb, and we just loved it. And we also loved seeing the wildlife, the birds, because to us everything that's just ordinary to you is exciting to us. So to
You-
see the parakeets and the animals
That's
and
right.
birds, it's
and
wonderful.
the monkeys, don't forget the
The
monkeys. We
monkeys.
love the monkeys, little friends
So
of
you've both
Hanuman and Rama.
based most of your studies in India. What was it that
No,
No, my
that's just me.
husband is
That-
the
Okay.
person.
Caroline is a Byronist and works on women
Byronist? I'm
writers.
so sorry.
Yes.
I saw your novels on the internet. It's Byron's heroines, right?
Yes, that's right. Not
Not-
novels,
I'm
and
so
not
sorry.
as
It's your
exciting
book.
as that.
It's your
Just critical books, I'm afraid.
Right. So what prompted you to base your work on India?
That's a good
Curries.
question.
Curries without doubt. Yes, from an early age I've loved curries. And I used to go when I was a young man to a curry house in Cardiff called the Taj Mahal, as so many curry houses in Britain are. And there I would have peas palau for 3 and 6pence.
He's not giving you a very sensible answer, I don't think, is he?
No, when
You were
I
interested in post-colonialism, weren't you, in critical theory as well?
I was interested, yes.
As well as
Well,
curries.
yes. And William Jones, when I discovered that he influenced Shelley, I thought that he might be an interesting character to work on. And
Right.
And that's been proved right because, I mean, his translations from the Sanskrit of the Shakuntala and Gita Govinda.
Okay.
I love reading them myself, and my students also. They can, in translation, of course, they can enjoy them, and
Sanskrit literature.
also his own poetry, his odes to or hymns to the Hindu deities
Oh,
Okay.
are fascinating, like the ode to Durga, for example,
right.
and the ode to Narayana, Vishnu is the spirit of God moving on the waters. There's some beautiful. They're not well known enough, either in Britain or India, I don't think.
So you wanted to make them well known,
Yes.
to bring them
yes.
out in the open.
That's right.
that right?
Yes.
Okay, that's
Coming to
great.
the literary text, what do you think when you represent history, traveling in your literary texts, in your works, important works?
Well, history and travelling. What I'm interested in is the way in which the Orientalist regime established by Warren Hastings was actually patronising Persian historians, and this is interesting because it's a little bit as if they were paying historians to tell it in a pro-British way. And some of these Persian histories were very pro-British, but
Right.
a friend of Jones called Ghulam Hussain Khan wrote the Asaya Mutakarin, which was a history down to 1781.
Okay.
And that is very impartial. It seems to be impartial because it talks about decadent Mughal government, but it also talks about the best traditions of Mughal government. And it talks about the British, it criticises the British in many ways, but it speaks with respect of the British Parliament, for example.
Okay.
So there's a kind of balance in the Asaya Mutakarin, which I think is a fairer portrayal of India and the British, and of course
What is your impression of colonial India at that time, from what you read?
Well, they were all here to make money, but
That's quite true.
a few at the time of Jones and people who belonged to the Asiatic Society, people like Francis Gladwin, they were genuinely interested in Indian culture.
Right.
And in one of my lectures that I gave to the linguistics department, I was saying that it's false to say that once Jones had discovered Sanskrit, he was only interested in an ancient Hindu past. That he maintained his interest in Indo-Persian culture.
Okay.
Because he was Persian Jones after all. And he loved poets like Vali Gujarati and Arzu and
Right.
Amir Khusro.
Yes.
And I was pleased to find in one of Amir Khusro's works, the one entitled The Third Sphere, that as early as that, I mean, Khusro died in 1325, as you know, he had compared Persian and Sanskrit and talked about Sanskrit as very polished and a very select language.
So,
Well, that's a long time before Jones described Sanskrit in 1786 as a more refined sister of Latin and Greek.
okay. So you're
So
interested in Indian languages?
Well, I'm not. I'm not a linguist really. I'm more interested in the literature because I'm so ignorant. Jones knew 28 languages. I know about 2.5.
And what about you? Have you gone through Indian literature?
No, I haven't got the same specialism as Mike.
Okay.
We really came more for Mike's research than mine.
Okay.
I'm a feminist literary critic
Okay.
and a romanticist and interested in women's writing. So I visited the Women's College when I was here. I was interested to meet the teachers and the students there. and I'm also a specialist in Byron.
Right.
So I had two colleagues and people that I knew before I came here already. So there was Dr. Shabana Bhattacharjee in Delhi and Professor Kidwai here,
Right.
who are both Byronists. So I had some contacts already, but really nothing to do with India because Byron didn't come to India.
Okay.
He did attempt to come to India,
Okay.
and he didn't get permission to come. So he travelled instead to the Ottoman Empire because he was a great traveller. He mentioned travel literature, and obviously he was a poet who wrote about his travels, but he didn't come to India. But Shabana, Dr. Bhattacharjee in Delhi, reckons that his idea in coming to India was exactly as Mike has talked about, to make money, because he wanted to, well, as a young man, he really wanted to go into politics. The literature was the sideline at the beginning.
Byron.
Yes.
Oh, that's
And in order to get into politics, he needed money. He'd inherited an aristocratic title, but no money.
great. Okay.
So he wanted to make money. So one idea was to go to India and make some money. But it was the East India Company turned him down. Didn't
Yes.
they wouldn't have
Right.
him.
Yeah.
So they were a
They
good
wanted the
judge,
monopoly
really, I
of
think.
the
Yes, they
money.
wouldn't have him. So he made money another way. He married a rich woman.
That's quite a revelation.
What's to be said for that?
How would you compare English literary text with Indian literary texts?
I don't think... Were you asking me? I don't think I've
Yes.
got enough expertise, really, to answer that. The only Indian literary texts that I've read are sort of modern novels, written in English.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's not a very... I mean, that's only one aspect, isn't it?
Alright.
So I don't know how I could answer that. And I suppose in terms of 20th century literature, I've been interested in... I have taught writers such as Salman Rushdie, for example.
Yes.
And he's a sort of hybrid writer, really. He's a bit, Indian, a bit Pakistani, a bit
Right.
English,
That's
went to
correct.
rugby school and all the rest of it. So, I mean, that in itself makes him quite a fascinating writer, I think, because he's trying to express the multiplicity of our world, which I think is... it's a very mixed up world, isn't it? If you go to London, you walk down the street, you've got every nation. Every
Obviously.
shop is from every nation.
That's
Yes.
true. That's
It's
true for
sort
almost
of,
all countries.
the literature sort of gives you back that feeling. And I
Absolutely.
think what my students were most interested in was the storytelling aspect, which I think perhaps is an Indian thing. Or a bit like the Arabian Nights, possibly. Stories within stories within stories,
So you find
Yes,
that
yes.
thing more defining Indian literature?
Well, certainly
Storytelling
perhaps an
aspect.
Eastern tradition,
Okay.
maybe. But Mike's a bit more
What about you, sir?
able to answer that, perhaps.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that Shakuntala made such an impact on Europe, and particularly in Germany. I mean, Goethe said that, once you've read Shakuntala, that's it, I mean, this is amazing stuff. Perhaps it had to do with the fact that the Sanskrit idea of rasa, these kind of states of feeling, sort of chimed in well with the novel of sensibility, which was current and in vogue in Britain at the time.
Okay.
I think my favourite Indian work that Jones translated is Gita Govinda, though.
Okay. So
Without
what-
a doubt.
what
Although
makes you-
Kalidasu is such a marvellous poet, and so early. I mean, Jones got it wrong. Jones thought that he was 1st century, but now people say, well, 4th or 5th. They're not quite sure. But he was writing such superbly sophisticated.
So what makes Geet Govind your favorite?
I love its descriptions of the Indian countryside and the mutuality of the love. It's interesting to compare that work from the 12th century with what was being written in Britain, or rather with the key texts of courtly love being written in Provençal, you know, the troubadours.
Okay.
And what I love about Gita Govinda is that it's mutual. They both suffer
Right.
when they're apart from each other.
Right.
It's not just the man.
Feeling, the emotions.
Yes, there is a mutuality of love. You haven't got that idea that the woman has to pretend. You know, in Finn Amour, you get the woman has to pretend indifference,
Yes.
and the man has to be on his knees. And please look. There, the love is mutual,
Right.
and it's so passionate on both parts.
Yes,
you know.
of course.
Yes.
So how would you compare English studies in Britain and in India? Studies in English literature.
Well, again, I mean, we're pretty ignorant about that, and we.
Okay.
That's okay.
But what's interesting was to learn here that here in AMU that the women are taught separate, apart from science. Women are taught separately from the men.
I don't think so.
Oh, well, that's wrong, is it?
Because we're studying together.
Yes, of
That's
course.
true. Yes, I never thought of that. But weren't you told that?
Well, that was the impression I got, but perhaps it's within certain
Like-
departments, is it? Or perhaps I got the wrong
And the
impression.
women's college is different, but then we've got girls studying here in the postgraduate
Right.
classes.
Yes.
Right.
Oh, I see.
The
So is it-
graduate
that's
the
good.
graduate classes are different, but in the post graduation we're studying together.
Oh, the postgraduate. Yes, it's
Yeah.
undergraduate that is
Right.
separate.
Oh, the
Yeah.
undergraduates.
Yes.
Really
That's
sharing experiences and knowledge which we have got at our distant levels. Like I have been studying in boys educational institutes, and she's been studying in girls educational institutes.
Yeah,
So now what happens is when we come together at one point,
yeah.
we are really extracting out our experiences, our
Yeah.
knowledge and our skills, and we are combining together, and it is going to be very fruitful for us, isn't it, Zara?
That's right. I'm sure you must have seen girls over there in the Department of History and
Yes.
wherever
Yes.
you went, there must have
Yes.
been girls.
Yes,
Yes,
They,
yes.
they came
Yeah.
to the lectures. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
The undergraduate classes are separate, but in the postgraduate we're
right.
studying together.
Well, yes.
That's
well,
the-
that's significant then in
That's
itself,
right.
perhaps. Yes. But I mean, we learnt that the fees in Indian universities are around about 15 rupees a month.
Which university are you talking about?
Well, we were told that in Jamia Millia, and that's not true. I don't.
In
might
earlier days,
be. I mean, like, I
previously.
don't think so. It's like that now.
We didn't pay 15 rupees per day, but
A
it
month,
was a
you're
month.
saying, a month.
Sorry,
A month.
but it
Yeah.
was like when I was studying at one of the university schools,
Yeah.
I had paid 350 per month.
And
Right.
Aligarh Muslim University, the fee structure is much lower,
much
but in other
lower.
universities, like it's higher, of course.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
It's
What
very
other
nominal,
impressions you've made of Aligarh? If you know?
Well, everyone is so proud of it, and with good reason. I mean, Sir Said's foundation, I mean, in some
Right.
ways, politically, I might be more on the Jamia side.
Okay.
I hope you don't
I
get-
can understand.
I hope you don't slit my throat as I
No,
as
not
I
at
walk
all.
out the door. But no, what symbolised for me the ongoing tradition of learning here was when I visited a venerable professor in Sir Said House, whose name I've forgotten, but he was deep in conversation when we visited him with a young student from the mass communication department of Jamia Millia,
Okay.
Yes.
who is preparing a documentary, and he had a thick, much thicker than this, of what do you call those little cartoons that they do for the different shots?
This
Storyboard.
screenplay,
Storyboard.
storyboard, right?
Storyboard. To tell the story, he was composing a documentary, or had composed a
Okay.
documentary of this leading woman of Indian liberation, whose name I've also forgotten for the moment.
It's okay.
But she had two sons. Was it Bibi Anne?
Which period are you talking about? There
I
were
think
many
ar-
women in
Yes,
the
I think
independence
around
struggle.
about the time of following the Sepoy Revolt. Anyway, it was just marvelous to see the old gentleman, an expert on Muslim history,
Right, of course.
political history, advising the young man who was involved with the latest technology, an ongoing tradition of learning. And I think that for me anyway, seems to be an emblem of Aligarh with its past
Okay,
and its
the
future.
combining of traditional and the modern. right.
Exactly.
What about you, ma'am?
Well, if I want to pick out something, I think I was very inspired when one of the lecturers in the history and archaeology department took us to see the Aligarh fort.
Okay.
Because one or two people that I'd spoken to said, "Oh, there's not much to see there. It's just a park." And one of our friends said, "Oh, it's full of snakes. You don't want to go there."
Oh my God.
But we had a wonderful afternoon there because in a way I could see what the people meant. You know, that there isn't a huge amount to see.
Right.
You've just the walls and the shape of the fort. But because of the erudition of the lecturer, he was able to bring it all to life simply by his absolute command of the subject,
Right.
his knowledge of the entire site. He'd measured it, he'd studied it, he'd recorded it, and he was telling us all about various studies that he'd made of archaeological sites all around the district, and it was absolutely fascinating. And
Yes, he made it
I
come
could have
alive
listened
for
to
us.
him
Yes,
all
yes.
day, you know. So
Right.
that was a great memory. If I
Yes.
pick one thing out.
Ma'am, you talked about Salman Rushdie and his works. So my question to you is, what do you think when it comes to Indian literary texts and when it comes to English literary texts? And how would you see Indian culture as far as you are concerned? I think you are coming for the second time to India.
Yes, that's right.
And you are also coming for the second time.
Yeah.
See the malls, see mushrooming of malls, around, all over the world, and particularly in India. Pepsi culture is there. So what is your standpoint, and how would you define it in the literary text?
In the literary text?
Yes.
I'm not sure if I can answer that. Do you mean in
No.
modern, our own reactions? Or
I guess he means the reflection of the modern way of life
Yes.
in literature. I
And
guess
would
that's
you
what
like
he
to
means.
incorporate all those things which have come to India in your British writings?
I don't know about British writings, but obviously in modern literature you want today's experience to be represented, don't
Yes,
you?
of
So
course.
globalization is a topic that you want to see in literature. I mean, as far as my own subject is concerned, literature, I can see, I gather, I surmise from the little that I've seen and talked to people in India that the subject is changing, that maybe an older generation has read British literature.
Yes.
I'm talking about English literature now.
Right.
A lot of British literature, canonical works, Shakespeare and Wordsworth and all the rest of it. And I think the young people, I would guess, as far as I've talked to them, which is only a little, are most interested in contemporary literature.
Yes.
That's my
Right.
guess. And of course, that's exactly as it should be. So every subject changes. It wouldn't be at all interesting if it stayed the same. So our discipline is changing, and it's exciting period, I would have thought, for students at the moment, for reading and writing literature in English, in India and in other countries as well, because English is a language which
Evolving.
is uniting people from all over the
Right.
globe,
All over
I
the
think,
world,
really. More to do with the
Yeah.
Americans than the British, really. But
It's become universal now.
it's become a universal language.
Yes,
So,
it is.
of course, there are lots of issues about that. I mean, I dare say that there is vibrant literature in other languages in India. And maybe there are issues about whether you should translate some of those books into
That
English.
makes it available to more people, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yes.
If there are such discussions here,
Mhm.
then we would understand that, because we come from an area of Great Britain called Wales, which has its own language also.
Right. Well,
So we have colleagues in our department who write novels and poetry and plays, and very many of them write in Welsh.
Hmm.
They have to make a decision. If they write in Welsh, they will only get a certain audience.
Right.
So do they then write in English or translate their Welsh writing into English, which it makes it not quite the same,
Obviously.
you know? So
Some
I don't
things are
know,
lost in
maybe
translation.
your writers have some similar problems and issues that they have
And
to
so,
resolve.
ma'am and sir, best literary texts have been coming and been written by, different novelists. If we would take the example of Arvind Adiga, he has won such a big prize. And if we would talk about Arundhati Roy, or if we talk about Salman Rushdie, as you said, so we see that, and we are of the opinion that these best literature are coming from India. So what is your opinion? How would you, elaborate
React
it
to it.
further?
Well, you see that I don't read anything published after.
He rarely comes out of the 18th
1830,
century.
really. As soon as the evangelicals and the Anglicists come over here, and Macaulay, I give up. I give up then.
So you've been reading a lot of text. Obviously, you based your studies on 18th century India. So
Yeah.
when you finally came to India, what was it that you expected, and what was it that you
Well,
found?
I tried to find Garden Reach, which is where Jones had a bungalow on the Hooghly. And it's now a huge dockyard.
Obviously.
One can't go back, I learned that. It's the same in England, it's the same everywhere. And
What were your reactions to that?
I hate to see Pepsification, as you call it, anywhere. I hate to see it in my own country.
Okay.
Yes, of
If
course.
India wants it, India must have it. But
Although in some ways you can find the 18th century more readily in Calcutta than you can in London,
yes,
because
that's true, actually.
they've got the most magnificent buildings
In Calcutta-
left
in
by
Kolkata.
colonial times
Yes.
in
Right,
Calcutta.
right.
Much more magnificent than anything in London.
Oh,
Well, it's
That's-
true.
that's
it's
quite-
true, isn't it? And what was magnificent in London in the 18th century is largely being knocked down.
Yeah.
There's not that much left, because the Victorians, it was a bit like New York, I think. The
Yes.
Victorians just knocked down and built new. So in some ways you can get back to the 18th century
Okay.
in
And
India.
ma'am, what sort of impression you are taking back to your country, and what sort of impression you want to leave on particularly
Algerians.
Indians
and in particular Algerians.
yeah, Algerians.
Indians
We call
in
it
general and
Algerians.
Algerians in particular.
Yes, of course.
This will be the last question.
Oh,
Right,
yes.
I guess.
Well, everyone that we've met has been so kind to us, particularly
Thank you so much.
Dr. Shabana, Dr. Gulfishan
Gulfishan
Khan.
Sharma.
I'm
Right.
getting mixed up here. And her husband Israel, who've taken care of everything and have arranged people to take us here, as they arranged, Dr.
We've never been so well looked after, have we?
Movember, yes. People have been so very kind and helpful, and that's certainly our impression of Allegorians. And India, sorry, you.
And I was going to say, the second thing I'd add to that is that although Mike started off, because we're ancient old people, jumping out of the way of the rickshaws and all get, we Brits, we can't be doing with the roads and all the rest of it. But, the other side of that is the vibrancy and the youth.
Yes.
The youthfulness of
Right.
India,
Mm.
because Britain's quite an old country. To say not the country. Obviously the civilization of India is much older. I didn't mean that. I meant the population itself is old in Britain.
Yes.
Well, our age profile is old, but here we seem to see a lot of young people,
Right.
and it's
You see,
Larger
the
percentage
60s,
of
we're the 60s generation.
we're the old 60s generation.
And now we're 60,
Now
nearly.
we're all absolutely
And you don't
ancient.
look like 50.
Nearly.
Yes, you
Very
have to
young.
be, still young at heart.
So it's nice it keeps us young to meet young people, and I have the impression that Indian society is more dominated by youth than
The larger
Yes,
percentage
it
of our population is youth, of
Yes,
course.
It is.
and so it
well,
may
that's
be
the
a bit
opposite,
tiring.
yes,
We may
but-
have to go and have a lie down.
Yes.
Or something. But it is very stimulating.
Well, thank you
It
so
was a
much for
great
being
session.
with us,
Pleasure.
and it was wonderful talking to you.
Thank
Really.
you.
It's a pleasure.